lowering the cost of tuition in the immediate future, and how will you practically do so without increasing class sizes?
Thank you. And we are starting here with, where did we leave off last time?
That was first last.
Thank you. We're starting off with Mr. Horner.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you for the good question. Here's the honest answer. We have a nearly $6 billion shortfall in the next biennium. And to suggest that we are going to be able to use that money to significantly reduce tuition in the short term isn't honest to you. And so I won't make that promise. But here's what we can do and what we need to do in the long term. I think, first of all, we need to make sure that we are investing in our great two-year schools so that students in 11th and 12th grade can start taking college classes and that 12th grade graduates can move into their two-year schools to start taking their generals at a lower cost with a seamless transition into four-year schools. But I believe we also need to take a look at our higher education costs and figure out how do we reduce the costs? How do we reduce maybe the number of majors in some campuses so we can reduce the overhead? How do we lower the cost in other ways so that we can afford it? Then we need to look at the programs that have worked, including the student grant program, and eventually fund those at full levels.
Thank you. Representative Emmer.
Some leadership in the higher education institutions like to always point at state funding as being the only problem. And, you know, state funding is not the only problem. In fact, it's not necessarily a matter of not having enough state funding, because there'll never be enough. It's not a matter of students not being able to pay. It's a matter of our higher education institutions not delivering an affordable product. They've got to start looking at their own overhead expenses. You heard Senator Dayton talk about how the MnSCU system has the third highest tuition in the country. This is an issue that we all have to work on, but the people that are running these institutions really have to start looking at their administrative costs and looking how they're delivering education. In the future, it should be probably more smaller staff, more efficient, more consumer or student-centered. We should find other ways with technology to start delivering our higher education opportunity.
Well, I agree with Mr. Horner that the honest answer is to recognize that we have to resolve a $5.8 billion projected shortfall for the next biennium before we can add dollars into any area. And I would work with the legislature to do that. And as the Minnesota economy and the U.S. economy hopefully improve in the years ahead and more resources are available, education would be absolutely my #1 priority. Recognize, as I said earlier, early childhood, K-12, and higher education. And I agree with Representative Emmer that we're going to need to look for administrative efficiency so we can make sure that every education dollar possible is going into your education, and, which should be the priority.
If I could follow up, asking all three of you something that Representative Emmer highlighted, and that is technology. What is your position about online education? What are its benefits and what are your concerns? In the same order.
Well, I think all of the research has shown that the introduction of online education has great value, but it has great value mostly as access. I mean, it doesn't reduce costs, and in fact, a lot of online courses are actually more expensive to deliver. Now, we should still do it because there are important values in access. We ought to look at some of the hybrid classes that have been very successful. We ought to make sure that we have the access. But part of that then is that we also have to look at how do we make sure that we have high-speed broadband internet connections available around Minnesota. We hope we can do that as a private investment, but in some areas it may take a public investment. Online works only if you can get the high download speeds. And so again, it's an answer that doesn't, or a question that doesn't have one neat, simple answer. It involves a whole variety of things, some of which include government.
Well, I think it's a shame to suggest that online, which is just in its infancy, is really not part of the solution because it costs just as much and we're not going to see efficiencies. I think with that attitude, we probably won't. I think we have to trust the people that are running these higher education institutions to understand that their job is to deliver not only a high-quality education, but also to deliver it at a cost that people can afford. I mean, Jackie and I have 7 kids. I've done the math. It's not going to be a cheap investment for us or our kids to go to college and pay for it. But you know what? It's worth it to do. We have to trust now the people that run these institutions to understand their runaway costs, just like we have to get a hold of them at the state level in government. They've got to get a hold of them here. They can't just keep saying it's tuition. They've got to look for those efficiencies and new delivery systems to offer the great higher ed opportunities that Minnesota's come to enjoy.
Senator Dayton.
I think the advantage is access. Those who, for whatever reasons otherwise, couldn't actually get physically to a campus have an opportunity to have higher education and the benefits of that. I would have two concerns. One is the quality, and the second is the old-fashioned work ethic. For those who can get to campus, I think there's a real benefit to having to get up early in the morning and go to school, as you have to get up and go to work, and having, as I said earlier, been to China and see people working 120 hours a week, the competition that all of you are going to face in this global economy is going to be a greater challenge than we've had previously. So part of that, I think, is a benefit of on-campus education.
Thank you. We'll now hear our second question. And we're starting here with Representative Emmer.
My name is Ian Larson. I'm a journalism and religious studies major, and I am the managing editor at the Minnesota Daily. So, in light of recent suicides among students, gay rights has received a lot of attention lately. What would you do for gay rights in Minnesota?
In terms of what, sir?
In terms of legislation that may arise throughout the state legislature.
You know, all these issues are very important, and if you're talking about the bullying legislation that was brought up at one of our last debates, as I've said before, and I don't know how many people know this, but we already have bullying legislation in this state. We already have policies in place that school boards and school administration are supposed to set in place policies to deal with issues having to do with bullying, harassment, making people feel uncomfortable for any reason. I think the bigger issue for us going forward is to start empowering our teaching professionals and parents, other adults, so they don't fear a lawsuit every time they step in and try to solve a problem. Let's protect them so they feel that they have the authority to step in and stop tragedy before it ever occurs. And I think that's the next step. As far as the governor of the state of Minnesota going forward, I made it very clear. I think the governor, that's an issue for all of us. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm done. Thank you.
Senator Dayton.
I support the anti-bullying legislation. I think it's a terrible tragedy that young people are taking their lives because of their sexual orientation, the harassment, the bullying that takes place. As James Madison said many years ago, if men were angels, government would not be necessary. Well, government is necessary, and it's important that government step in and make it very clear. Here in Minnesota, any kind of bigotry or racial intolerance or religious intolerance or intolerance to bigotry based on sexual orientation is absolutely prohibited in this state. And if I'm governor, I'll use every moral authority of that office to make it very, very clear by everything I do and sending that message. I also support marriage equality. I believe in the founding principles of this country that all men and women are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That certainly ought to include the right of any American citizen to marry the person that he or she loves.
Mr. Horner.
My father was one of the first TV and radio personalities in this market. And when he died a few years ago, Matt Little, who was one of the state's great civil rights leaders, told me a story that I hadn't heard before. He said that he could always count on my dad in the 1940s and 1950s when Minnesota wasn't a very hospitable place to people of color. He could always count on him to MC the NAACP Freedom Fund dinner. And I'd never heard that story before. That's the environment that I grew up in. So I do believe that we ought to, pass the anti-bullying legislation, but I also believe that we need to be a state of equality. I think we need to integrate it into our culture. And I do think that we need to have marriage equality. I think we need to have respect for all people, and that gets back to the issue of immigration. This needs to be a state that is welcoming, that opens its doors to diversity, that respects all people and celebrates their differences.
So, Mr. Horner, just to follow up briefly, to be clear, if you were governor, you would sign into law if the legislature brought you legislation about gay marriage. You would sign that.
Yes, I mean, I've already been working on it both in my community service career as well as in my professional career.
Representative Emmer?
I've made it very clear that this topic, it's important to a lot of people. Every issue is important to somebody. This issue, I've got a clear history of where I stand on the issue of marriage. But this election, this campaign, has to be focused on getting Minnesota moving again. That's what we've been talking about for months. You've got to create jobs again in the state of Minnesota. That's what the next governor should be focused on.
Okay, we're ready for our third question.
Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Abu Amara. I'm a first-year public policy student at the Humphrey Institute of Public Affairs, and I'm also the vice president for public affairs for the Graduate and Professional Student Assembly. And the question is, the University of Minnesota is a leader on research into sustainability initiatives, both nationally and internationally. How would you use the U of M to further Minnesota's inevitable transition to a clean energy economy? And then, more importantly, how would you pay for it?
And we're starting here with Senator Dayton.
Well, it's an excellent question because it is so much about the opportunity that the energy challenge presents the state and our opportunity to lead. And as I said earlier, well, I would issue, as part of my bonding bill, state bonds that would create a revolving loan fund that would start with the state colleges and university buildings. As I said earlier, they're doing it at the University of Minnesota Morris. Retrofit those buildings, retrofit the heating and cooling systems to use alternative energy. I'm told a successful project pays with energy savings in 5 to 7 years, and as that money comes back to the revolving loan fund, it would be loaned out to local governments for their buildings and for schools for their buildings and state government for its buildings. And in a decade, we could transform the public sector's use of energy in Minnesota, save money, and also create an alternative energy industry. Then I would go as governor to the companies established in that field or new companies say, look, we have a proven 10, 20-year commitment in Minnesota to using alternative energy. Come locate your operation, your manufacturing here in Minnesota.
Mr. Horner.
Well, I do believe that we need to transition away from the subsidies for ethanol. I think that it is not a program that is returning value to Minnesota today. Now we need to respect the contracts that are out there, that the subsidies expire in 2013 and I wouldn't renew them. Instead, I do believe that we need to be making investments in research. And look what's already going on. Central Lakes College with its Ag Center in Staples is doing tremendous work in biomass. Groundbreaking work that will open new doors. The University of Minnesota at Morris in wind energy around the state. So I think that's where we need to make our investment in research and then let the marketplace take over. But we also need to integrate into that a reminder that the cheapest energy is conservation. And so we ought to have that as a high priority. But I also want to go back, Representative Emmer, to what you just want to say. One of the reasons I'm no longer a Republican is because a party that thinks that economic development, fiscal responsibility, and equality are conflicting opinions is not a party that I can any longer belong to.
Representative Emmer.
Well, and I respect that, just like I respect anybody else's point of view. Mine is quite simply, we've got to start working on the things that we all agree on. And the thing that we have to all agree on is that we can't just keep doing what both of you are proposing, which is just keep growing government at unsustainable rates. That's these people out here that are in school, it's your debt. It's your future. You are spending it by raising taxes yet again and growing government even more. You're creating more of a debt that will put on the shoulders of these young people who we're going to send out into the world as soon as they get out of this great institution and tell them, now go realize your greatest dreams, but there aren't going to be the dreams there because they're going to be paying our debt for years to come. How do you address the issue that you're talking about? You just hit it. The University of Minnesota has a great tradition as a research university. It's got a worldwide reputation as a top-notch research university. We've got to incent more private University of Minnesota partnerships that will start to move us to whatever opportunities are out there for new alternative energies, and we've got to let the marketplace work.
Okay. We've got a lot of issues going on in this question here. I want to follow up first with regards to ethanol, something that Mr. Horner brought up, and if Senator Dayton and Representative Emmer could quickly respond regarding your support for ethanol subsidies, as Mr. Horner outlined his.
I support the continuation of the ethanol subsidy.
Well, it's a non-issue in the state of Minnesota. We keep talking about it, but in fact, any subsidies in there, about $14 million right now out of a $300 million ag and veterans budget that was passed in the state of Minnesota. That $14 million was a promise that was made way back when. It's running out right now. So the statement that I'm against subsidies is great, but there aren't going to be any more subsidies in the next biennium. They're being paid off right now. And going forward, right now there's an issue at the federal level as to whether or not there will be subsidies or whether there will be legislation to try and create more pumps, more producer pumps, so that there can be more of a marketplace, not just for ethanol, but for any biofuels, any other fuels. The idea is that you should be able to choose, if you're a consumer, you should be able to go to your local filling station and with a flex fuel vehicle be able to choose at some point within the next decade whichever is the cheapest source of energy to run that vehicle. That's the marketplace we're trying to get to.
Thank you. And now I want to touch on something that has to do with leadership in the governor's mansion. I think you've all made it pretty clear that the budget deficit and jobs and the economy are some of Minnesota's biggest challenges and what Minnesota is facing right now. But I guess when it comes to socialist issues, that isn't something that we've talked a lot about in this campaign, but nonetheless, as governor, you would all likely get legislation dealing with these issues. And so just quickly, don't you agree that it is important to have a full airing of your positions on these issues so that voters know where you stand? Because there are some voters for whom these are the most important issues. We'll just start with Senator Dayton.
Yes,
in this order.
absolutely.
And do you feel like these issues have been adequately discussed in this campaign?
Some venues more than others. Again, we've had 24 debates, so we've covered quite a range of issues, and we've been asked our question. I mean, it's something specific, but I mean, we've certainly some of the questions we've gotten from NPR, Question of the Week, and some of the newspaper questionnaires have filled out, and certainly the organizations themselves. I mean, I filled out, my goodness, got to be well over 100 questionnaires from various groups, most of which have been put on their website. So, I mean, there's certainly great thing about our democracy and the great thing about Minnesota, it has been the public participation, as evidenced here today. Look at the fantastic turnout, and thank you all for being here. And as I say, the 24th debate, and we've had this kind of interest all over Minnesota. And if you want the antidote for 30-second commercials or 7-second sound bites, it's absolutely to have these kind of opportunities for people to ask us questions, for people to see us and hear our answers, unrehearsed and unvarnished. And so those questionnaires are also an important part of this process.
Thank you. Representative Emmer?
I don't know, after 24 debates, I think it'd be unrehearsed. I would say this, thank you for asking the question again. I'll say it one more time. I have a very clear record on these issues that anybody can go look up and see, but the next governor, the next legislature in the state of Minnesota, and frankly all across this country, has to start to recognize where we all agree. And if we can't all agree on how we're going to create a future that is going to provide the opportunity for not just you that are in this room, but future generations, then we've really lost. We got to start talking about how we need to redesign the delivery system of government and how we have to keep growing jobs again in this state. Because I would say this, Jackie and I know that these gentlemen up here, we do not want to be the first generation that leaves less of an opportunity to the next generation that we've been offered. The only way we're going to address that problem is by getting control of out-of-control government spending and starting to create a business environment that grows new jobs in this state.
Mr. Horner,
Well, I do think that all issues are important, and as we've traveled around the state, I'm sure all of us have received questions, not just in the public forums, but in the individual media interviews and other forums that we've done as individual candidates. I think there's been extensive media coverage on the different issues. I know that you certainly can go to my website, and there's a full discussion of the issues. So I think that all of the issues are out there. But again, I do agree. I mean, I think that there are clear differences, clear points of distinction. And I think those points of distinction really come down to, are we going to look in the rearview mirror and try to create solutions based on very narrow partisan ideas, or are we going to move forward? Are we going to move forward with innovation, with new ideas, with a willingness to invest, with a willingness to look at how we create a better future for everyone? I think that's our challenge. And in the end, that's the fundamental issue that has to be decided in this election.
Thank you. Our next question.
Hi, my name is Sarah Bramerschley. I am a junior majoring in political science and Jewish studies, and I'm here today on behalf of the Department of Political Science. There is a current trend of shutting down public schools and opening privately run charter schools in their place, such as the initiative to shut down Minneapolis North High School. How do you plan on protecting our public school system and not privatizing K-12 education?
Mr. Horner, you're first on this.
Well, and again, Sarah, I mean, many of the charter schools are public schools. They're part of the public school system. But I don't think that it's a decision that we either shut down this or we keep this one open. I think we need a much broader reform approach to K-12 education that starts with making sure that we're investing early childhood education so that every child comes into kindergarten fully prepared for success, that we look at the rigidity imposed by No Child Left Behind and either get more flexibility or we decide that we're going to take on the responsibility ourselves because we do have great teachers. We have very effective teachers, and then we've put handcuffs on them. And they have, right now, an inability to keep a lot of kids engaged because of what we've said that the way in which they have to teach. And then great schools have great principals, and we need to be willing to stand up and make the investment to have great principals. We also need to engage Education Minnesota to deal with some of the issues around seniority so we can keep our great young teachers and around alternative certification. It's all of those things that we need to do.
Thank you. Representative Emmer.
Sarah, I would say Jackie and I are the only ones right now that are running for this office that actually have kids in our public schools. This is a very important issue to us, and I hope you will go look at our website at emmerforgovernor.com because we have proposed the only complete and very aggressive reform package for K-12 education. It's based on measure, report, and reward. You got to start measuring the outcomes, set high standards, measure outcomes, and make sure that our kids are performing to the levels we expect. Why? Because it's not just about throwing more money at it. If it was, then Washington, D.C. would have the best public schools in the country. It does not. Second, when you look at report, you got to be able to report the results in a timely manner during the year to teachers so they can gauge their progress, but also to parents and to students and to employers so that parents can make choices that best fit their child's needs in terms of education. And then third, we believe, imagine this, that good teachers, effective teachers, should get paid more based on the results that they get.
Thank you. Senator Dayton.
I would like to point out, Representative Emmer, that my son Andrew, the only of my two sons still in school, is, as I said earlier, a third-year law student here at the University of Minnesota, which last time I looked as a public educational institution, and an excellent one at that. So, but I respect the commitment you and your excellent wife has made to our, really fine person. I mean that sincerely, as you know, to public education. In response to your question, Sarah, the state funding for public schools in Minnesota has been cut by $1,300 per student in real after inflation dollars over the last 8 years. And as I've seen all over this state, that's meant overcrowded classrooms. Go to Rochester, Minnesota, fairly well off part of our state. And a fifth grade classroom has 35 children and one teacher. A school that has 17 different languages and dialects spoken. So the cutback in funding commitment to our public schools has a real impact in Minneapolis and Rochester and all over the state.
Thank you all. So this question has raised the issue of sort of empathy and an understanding based on your own experiences. And so I want to follow up with this thought, and that is that governors are generally surrounded by the economic and social elite. What is there in your background, sort of going beyond your children's experiences, and in your current life that gives you insight into and empathy for those who are struggling in Minnesota? And we'll go in the same order here.
Well, I mean, it is the half of my experience that is community service and the commitment that I've always brought to that. So I've had the opportunity to serve in leadership positions on the board as a volunteer, working in the programs on organizations like Catholic Charities, dealing with families in crisis, dealing with the homeless population, with Hearth Connection, a terrific program that deals with families in crisis, that deals with those kinds of programs. Wilderness Inquiry, a program that is uniquely Minnesota, that opens the outdoors to the disabled. I mean, it's all of those kinds of experiences and many more that have made me the complete person that I hope I am as a candidate and as a governor.
Representative Donald?
Yeah, well, you know, I think it's a very sad statement if it's true that governors are surrounded solely by the political and social elite or whatever it was. That's a sad statement. I think that's why we're here. Because Jackie and I, we didn't come from inside of government. I haven't been representing clients, lobbying for money for government projects, and I've been running for public office for the last 30 years. Yeah, I served on city councils. I think the only thing that probably is more intense in terms of giving back to the community are serving on school boards. But we've been raising a family with 7 kids, and there's never enough money. There's never enough money for food. There's never enough money for clothes. That's the experience. Plus, for the last 20 years, guess what? I've been coaching kids from all different walks of life. And you know, when you have kids that don't have enough at home and you got to find ways to help them participate, or when you have a young man look up at you on the bench who has tears streaming out of his eyes because his parents just told him they were getting divorced, these are real life situations that we experience all the time, and that's the kind of people that we would still be surrounded by if we get elected.
Senator Dayton.
Well, I'm very fortunate what I was born into, and I've tried to use that good fortune in ways to benefit other people. And after I graduated from college, part of the training program for the teaching in public school in New York City, I lived with a family in a public housing project in New York City, and then taught in New York, and then went to Boston, where I was a street worker and a counselor for a social service agency. And the last 35 years of my life, I've spent most of those years in public service to the people of Minnesota. I've been more cities and counties all over the state than anyone else running for this office. And I've rolled up my sleeves, worked with people, seen their jobs lost with plant closings, and a woman up in Two Harbors lost her husband and lost most of her pension right after. And sometimes you find all you can do is hug people and cry with them, but you share their life experience. You work with them to overcome the challenges in their life, and that's what draws me to public service, is a chance to work directly and try to help make people's lives better.
Thank you. We'll now go to our 5th question.
Hi, my name is Natalie Wagner, and I'm a University of Minnesota graduate pursuing a second degree in political science. And I wanted to ask, what is your position on a woman's right to have an abortion? And would you support or oppose any new restrictions on abortion in Minnesota?
And this is Representative Emmer, Senator Dayton, then Mr. Horner.
Well, thank you so much for asking the question. Again, I've got very clear views on these issues. There's no question. And I'm going to say it again. If we are going to take all of our time running for office in this state and in this country and just identify the things that divide us on a regular basis, we're never going to move to where we need to be. If you just give me the respect that I'd give to you, I will answer the question again. This next governor, the next legislature, everybody in this state, rather than focusing on the things that divide us, needs to start focusing on the things that unite us. The one thing we should all agree on is creating a future that each one of us can enjoy whatever quality of life and whatever social viewpoint we have. That's the place where we all agree. Let's get back to working on reforming government and trying to create jobs in this state so that everybody can enjoy the quality of life that they would like to enjoy.
I believe a decision regarding pregnancy should be a decision between a woman and her doctor and her God. And I believe abortion should be safe, legal, and rare.
You know, again, I'm going to just say, as governor, I can do more than one thing. We can have a couple of agendas. We can get a couple of things done. So, in direct answer to your question, no, I would not support additional restrictions. I would leave the status quo. But I think we also need to take a step beyond that. And we need to work on where we do agree, and that takes leadership. And part of where I think most Minnesotans agree is that we should reduce the need for abortions. And I think we get there by making sure we have access to good health care, including contraceptive care, that we have good, responsible sex education in the schools, and that we're funding good adoption services. And that's where we agree. That's leadership that comes from a governor. It's not enough just to articulate platitudes, and it's not enough to say we can only do one thing. We need leadership.
Representative Emmer and Senator Dayton, I'll give you a chance to follow up on some of the issues that Mr. Horner just talked about, which is pregnancy prevention.
Oh, absolutely. We want to prevent unwanted pregnancies, and certainly we want to encourage adoption. And I failed to answer your question most directly, that I would not support any additional restrictions.
Representative Emmer?
I don't think there's anything to add to that. I mean, if you're asking me what my position is, as I've told you, I've had a very clear position on these issues. I'm pro-life. I'm the only one that is. But going forward, you got to focus, and we can play games with words, but you got to focus on the things we agree on. The idea is you got to create an economic engine that actually runs so that you can enjoy the quality of life that you would like to, and everybody else here can too.
We'll now hear from our sixth student question.
Hi, I'm Devin Henry. I'm a political science and a journalism senior. I'm also the editor-in-chief of the Minnesota Daily. As you know, the University of Minnesota is in the process of choosing a new president. If, hypothetically, you were on the search committee, what qualities would you look for in a new president? What goals should they aim for, and how will you work with them to achieve those goals?
And Senator Dayton, you're first, and then Mr. Horner, then Representative Emmer.
It's a crucially important position for the University of Minnesota and for our entire state. I would look for a proven leader, someone who has a proven ability to lead a higher education institution or a significant part of one, someone who would have respect and support of the faculty, of students, someone who could work well with people, a good listener, a consensus builder, someone who understands that there's a relationship that needs to be built with the political process, with the legislature and the administration, and someone who would be a national leader for higher education and distinguish this state well as those leaders have in the past.
Mr. Horner.
You know, Devin, it's a great question, and I thought it was so important, actually, that I found the opportunity to talk to some of the people in the search committee to share my views. And here's what I suggested to them, is that, first and foremost, I do believe we need somebody who has a proven track record as an innovator in running a large public university, somebody who has shown the ability to really be creative, to figure out how we're going to move this university forward, to make it a world-class research university. Secondly, it has to be somebody who understands the complexity of running this kind of a very complicated financial organization. Somebody who understands the finances, who can bring efficiencies to the university, and somebody who's open to change. Because one of the things I believe we are going to have to look at is whether or not we need to look at a different alignment of systems between the university and the MnSCU schools. But I also think that it's going to be somebody who, frankly, we're going to have to recruit and identify, somebody who's not looking for a job because we want the best, we want the brightest, we want somebody who already has shown the ability to get all of these things done.
Where to go? I would suggest somebody with a strong leadership background that's not management background, that's not necessarily from an education, a higher educational institution. Perhaps somebody from the business world that has run a major corporation, that is interested in coming in and innovating and not only creating the efficiencies to deliver the high quality education that we expect in this state in an affordable manner, but who can also be the salesperson that goes out and starts to create those public-private partnerships between the university and different businesses that are interested in the research component that is the University of Minnesota's tradition. Because I think if we're going to grow in the right direction and create jobs, that's going to be not only making sure it's affordable and that we bring the university in the 21st century that the technology we have provides, but also somebody who can start to draw on past experience so we can get these new opportunities for research and jobs in the state of Minnesota.
Thank you all. And now, to conclude, with each of you for about 45 seconds, there are many college seniors who will soon graduate in this audience. Please give these students advice as we move into the future. We'll start with Mr. Horner.
Well, the best advice that I can give you is to follow your passion, to think of yourself as lifelong learners, to think of yourself as people who are going to be open to all of the experiences that life has to offer. I've been very fortunate with my wife Libby and me, with our 3 kids, in being able to take the opportunities that life has come my way. But I've also been open to the new experiences, and that's the best advice that I can give to you. The second best advice I can give to you is try to tackle a couple of issues at the same time.
Representative Emmer.
You know, there's nothing wrong with the personal stuff. I don't know that it's appropriate, but that's what I'd say to you, is no matter where it is you go in life, you are going to have people that attack you for your views and for your positions. This is your election as much as it is ours. This is the only, and it's not advice, it's just encouragement. Please, look at the candidates. On the one side, you got 2 people who say government needs to grow at any cost, and guess what? It's at your expense. Because if government's going to keep growing with unsustainable growth over the next 2 to 6 years, you're not going to have any opportunities by 2020. I see something better. I see an opportunity where we can put government back in proportion to the private sector and grow jobs. That should be our future that we all agree on.
Senator Dayton.
Over 2,000 years ago, the philosopher politician Cicero said that in a democracy, the most important office is that of citizen. And I congratulate you on your completion of your undergraduate education, and I encourage you to be citizens of this democracy and to be involved in whatever your chosen career in public service in whatever way. To be on the school board, be on the city council, county commissioner, boards, commissions, run for public office, be involved in the problem solving, the great challenges, which are also the great opportunities of your lifetime and of your generation. I wish my generation were leaving this state and nation world in better shape for you. Hopefully we will so in the years ahead. But recognize that your responsibility as a citizen of this democracy is your own life, and also to serve your fellow citizens and future generations.
Please join me in thanking all of these candidates for their participation
Great job,
in this debate.
Great job, Tom.
Thank you.
Mark.
Thank you very much.